As a follow-up video on the subject of soteriology, specifically on Calvinism, I wanted to briefly go over the doctrine of grace, which is essentially the 5 points of TULIP. So TULIP is an acronym, T-U-L-I-P, and they all stand for something that is a biblical truth that is found in the Bible. Kind of like the 5 pillars of the Reformation, the 5 solas, which is like what this shirt is, as I've already explained that before. You see, the T in TULIP stands for something called total depravity, which is essentially to say that every single human is completely and totally depraved, meaning that of our own free decision-making agency, we would never choose anything beneficial to us. We would only ever choose that which is sinful, which means that if God gave us the option to choose him, we would deny it by our nature. The U is unconditional election, which means that there is absolutely nothing that you do and nothing that you could do that God would ever use as a deciding factor on whether or not you would be saved. He saves us for reasons that we cannot know, that we cannot comprehend, that we cannot understand, and he chooses who he saves unconditionally. The L is limited atonement, which means that Jesus did not die for the sins of every single human. Jesus died specifically for the sins of those who would believe in him. So everyone in the Old Testament times that believed in a coming Messiah, everyone at the time who believed in the Messiah that was there with them physically and presently, and everyone who came after the Messiah who's looking back believing, God knew exactly who was going to believe in him, and those are the people that he died for specifically, and only those people did he die for. The I is irresistible grace, and this essentially means that God pushing you out of your total depravity, out of that state of your natural hatred towards God, he will push you, and you cannot resist that push into living a better life. You cannot resist that push into regeneration and acceptance of God's free gift of salvation. And finally, the P is perseverance of the saints, meaning once saved, always saved. Now, that doesn't mean, oh, I said I was a Christian and then no longer was a Christian. No, if you were truly ever a Christian, you would never leave Christianity. If you have true and biblical trust in Jesus as your Savior, then you are never going to fall away from that. There could be a point where you drift away, but you will always return at the end of your life if ever you believed originally. Now, people who make false proclamations all the time, those people, they're not Christians. They were never Christians. They claimed to be, they pretended to be, they lived that life delusionally thinking that they were because they never understood what Christianity was in the first place, which is a salvific relationship with the God who created us. 1 John 2:19 says they leave us to show us that they were never really of us, meaning that these people who claim to be Christians and that are no longer Christians, they were never actually Christians to begin with. It was a false proclamation, which is what James 2 is actually talking about. So whenever Catholics are saying, oh, well, what about James 2 when it says faith without works is dead? No, what that's saying is that if a person is claiming to be a Christian, but they're living their life in a way that is the exact opposite of how God commands you to live as a Christian, then that's evidence that you're not actually a Christian, which means it's a dead faith, a false faith. It is a false proclamation. It is a lie pretending to be something that you're not. Hopefully this made sense. If you have any questions on this, let me know. God bless.